PPA and the Reuters ones, right?
Yeah, and I'll specifically talk about the Reuters one. I think I show it as we start. Here, I'll share my screen with you real quick. Oh, someone else is here. Elliot! Yay! Hi, Elliot.
Oh, hello.
We are so excited about your work.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you. You guys have helped a lot with all of the suggestions. I've been trying to like run through everything and just keep it all in mind while working, but it's so much more than I ever thought.
Well, you are talented and you're able to really tell the story. Your toy liquidation photos are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. That was hard. It was really weird light in there, and I also felt really weird like following people around taking photos of them in the store, especially like the kids, because I always want to take pictures of kids and then ask their parents if it's okay to use them, so that their parent isn't like, "Ooh, let me like pose you," or you know, something like that. But it always feels a little bit weird to be taking photos of kids. I can't imagine how male photographers feel about that. Probably
exactly. We're very lucky.
Yeah. Oh, I had a quick question for you guys before we get started that I think you may have gone over in the session that I missed. And it's about light levels and how you can show the levels. I don't feel like I'm using the correct terms here, but you can see it as you look through the display and you're moving around. You can see the waves of light. That's something that we talked about pulling up whenever we first started, whenever we first got these cameras. And one thing I asked Jerry was, well, what is it supposed to look like? And he was like, I have no idea. You should ask the people when they come in. So that is my question.
Well, it's a great question. So what you're talking about are histograms on the back of the camera.
Yes, histogram, correct.
Yeah. So probably what they were trying to get you to be aware of is understanding that you need a certain amount of detail in your highlights and in your lowlights. So that's what you're supposed to be reading. You're supposed to be reading, do I have detail in white and black? I don't know what they told you was their standard. I don't
think they did. I think they just said, here's how you can literally just display it.
Yes, and so we have quite a few things to think about that. We're going to go over some editing, but if it's on your display now, for me, it totally annoys me. I can't stand it having it on.
Yeah, I haven't used it because I'm like, I don't know what this means, or I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of is just make sure there's not something that spikes too much.
Which is your whites usually.
Right.
So not wanting that. But I mean, at this stage, really, you can look at it and tell that. And then the thing that's really important about it in the camera is that if in whites, if there's no digital information, there's nothing you can do to bring that back, right? So sometimes if it's too dark, there'll be detail in there. But whites, there's nothing, and that's why a lot of the images that are, I don't know what's happening exactly, but that's what's happening with a lot of your images when they get to the digital point. There's no information.
They're too light.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. And so it's better to have it be too dark than too light. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Oh my gosh, never knew that. Let me just
so the idea is that you, the old saying is, you expose for the shadows. Okay, you expose for the shadows, you print for the light. Okay, so what you would be for the whites, right? Because again, we want to make sure that there's some kind of detail in the sky, for example, with the hi Christy, with the clouds, right? We don't want it to just go away. We need some of that detail. So when you're exposing, and it may be a little bit dark, in post-production, which is what we're going to talk about today, you can open up the exposure and get it better for print or digital. And this is one of the things that's the bigger picture issue, because I imagine your pressmen have some standards, or press women, press people have some standards, and then what's happening on the digital side. And which also brings me to a good point, is you want to always make sure you're saving those for your portfolio, the originals, right? Because you don't want to like tone it for the paper, and then when it comes to contest time or your portfolio, and that's what it's toned for, and it looks like crap, basically.
Yeah.
So should things be toned differently for contest and for just portfolio than they would be, I guess, for print? Because it'll be digital versus, okay, that makes sense.
You always want to give any kind of contest stuff the best, you know, you don't want to tone for what they're going to be looking at a giant
I see.
They're going to be looking at
yeah.
a giant screen. So,
Right.
Unless you're entering print product.
Right.
That makes sense.
Understand.
Contest season is February, by the way. So
we've got a minute.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So do you all have, and I think we sort of touched on this in the first session, a recommended program or website, something to organize, to keep portfolio images and favorite images like that? Do you guys have a recommended program?
Yes, I really recommend Lightroom, and I'll bring mine up here for a second to kind of show you. It's great for the organization, and you can tone the images. What you could also do in your particular case is you could have two different kinds of folders, one for print, one for digital, one, you know, if you wanted to get that complicated. So not complicated, but organized if you're that type. So let me see if I can share my screen with you real quick before we get started. So this is Lightroom. And what I have here is a series. Can you see it okay, everybody? So what I have here is a series of collections. And so you can think of these as the ones with the file box or file cabinet. I think of those as my books, right? These are my books. This is Africa. Then I have inside these different chapters and different ways of organizing everything. So if I need it to be, that's not a good example because there's nothing in there. If you can still see here, I have portrait. So then I have in here, I can have my author headlines, and then it can be different people. So say you had a, small business Littleton. So you could have a thing that was business, or you could have it in be portraits, or by day, whatever it is that, if you have a project you're working on, you could divide it by that. So you just can break it down so many different ways. And then you can let's see, this isn't another good example, but you can organize the images to be in different orders. And what it also allows you to do, so stand by with me 1 second, guys. I'm dug around too deep. My organizing is not the best. It's not that, it would be part of the Adobe Cloud.
And there actually is a photo subscription where it's just Lightroom and Photoshop. And I think it's $12 a month.
And you guys might be able to I get mine for $9 for some reason. I'm not sure why, but you can find it lower. You might be, I think it's something to discuss at the paper in terms of, moving forward, because you can archive everything. When you're bringing, not only in terms of like how you organize, but then, what are your other images in here when you take a shoot, when you shoot, right? You should be shooting more than you can possibly print. and you need a method to look and find those great ones. And so what are you using now?
So I use on my work computer, I use just the Windows, like the photo app that comes with Windows,
Okay.
which is called, I think it's just called Photos, yeah. But I also recently started using my personal laptop for work because this one is just a little tad too clunky. And so now I've been like, I don't know what to do because I don't have the same program. I have a Mac and haven't set up, because I can't plug, I also cannot plug my, in this computer, I can plug it directly, the memory card directly into the computer. And on my Mac, I can't do that. So I have to either like transfer it digitally using the camera, or just pull out this computer.
No, you just
get a card reader.
Yeah, they're like $20 on Amazon.
Okay.
They don't need to be like perfect.
Okay.
The cost is not really the thing. It's how gentle you use them.
Right. Which I'm not notorious
Um,
for my gentle use of gear.
I would, yeah, me neither. I would recommend you do that.
Okay.
And the systems that you can use through the cloud with a Mac are Lightroom. They have what's called Lightroom Mobile. So you can actually sync up your cell phone pictures with your other images if you wanted to, and that'd be something if you wanted to go forward to really think about for yourself, because you're probably taking some cell phone pictures for the paper too, I imagine, or notes or whatever. And that way, when you get home, your images from your camera, they can all be together if they're notes or whatever. And then you can like create, this is my story, this is liquidation story, or
right.
That
sounds good.
And then you can tone the images, and and it'll save you a lot of, let me see if I can go.
Never have I ever toned an image.
Never have you ever toned an image.
I don't know how to do it. I mean, I've done it for like Instagram, my personal Instagram, but I don't feel like I know what I'm doing with it ever. So I'm looking forward to learning about what actually makes a photo look better and just what makes it just look silly.
Let me see if it looks like there's a couple Scott's listening in, Christy Turner, Elliot. Yeah, all right, we're gonna wait a few minutes.
Oh, Annalise, I see this program that you sent. This is what you were talking about?
Yeah, so this is the photo package if you were interested in looking into that. Today we're going to be going over Pixlr because it's a free editing software, and it seems like people like that software. But this would just kind of be an option. It's what I use. I use Lightroom, and Lightroom Classic is what I believe what Jill was showing, or I believe that was Lightroom Classic.
You can get, I think it's a 14-day trial too.
Yeah, I hear
it is industry standard.
It is.
Pretty much everyone uses it, and not so much as in, hi Mark, not as much in journalism, so much, but so a photographer who is in a building, right, like you guys, you would probably use something else, but you would personally use Lightroom still. I don't know actually what the post does, but there's just so much you can do. Hi, Jessica.
Yeah. Lightroom is also just very user-friendly, journalistically, like Lightroom. The one I use, yeah, there's two different types of Lightroom. But it's very basic. It's kind of just exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows. It's a dial that you move. And so for very basic, just helping with visibility in an image, it's really quick and easy, and you can copy and paste edits to other photos that are in that same light.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, that will help you. Like if you always know you're going into some particular place, you could always copy that same setting and put it in. So there's a bit of learning curve, but it will save you tons of time in the end. It's definitely worth looking into.
Awesome.
Hello,
Thank you guys.
David. Hello, Glenn. All right. How's everyone doing? Hanging in there? Can't hear you, Mark. Mute. It's that same old problem. All right. Well, I'm going to get going because we have a lot to discuss today. And we had a nice chat a minute ago, looking at some of your, oops, excuse me. All right.
It looks like we have one of CCM's favorite models on with us today.
Oh, who's that?
Well, Russell Gilbert.
Ah! Russell, that's a feisty name. Hi, buddy. Well, thank you for coming today. I know you guys are all at home, and I hope you're able to get a little chill time outside after this or keep working. We're really excited to come to the end of this workshop. Sorry, hold on one second, y'all. Having a little technical difficulty. There we go. Had to show off our headshots that we got in Littleton. The lighting always makes you look good no matter what's underneath. So we got very lucky, got to see a little bit of Littleton, which was very nice. We came down last weekend or last Wednesday after the workshop, and it was a fun experience for us. We really want to make sure that we recognize what you have done over the last couple weeks with us, but not only as a journalist. We are so thankful for what you're doing and the hard work that you are putting into all of your stories. Being a journalist has never been easy, and it's never going to be easy. And right now, you are all putting so much more extra into your work and having to make decisions and sacrifices that personally affect you and your family and your relationships and your health. And that's a lot to take on for being able to communicate to your community. But I just see so much need for it. You guys are fighting the good fight, and I hope that you will continue to feel that way. I think it's really easy to get caught up in all the negative that's out there about media and what you did and how you misquoted and all of that, and all the media is this, and that can weigh on you. But I think we have to remember all the voices that we don't hear, that know that you are out there, that are appreciative of what you're doing. And we need you again more than ever. We can't rely on big national stories. We need to know what's going on in our backyard. You're bringing home into the community, and you really are the frontline heroes again for us. So thank you for all you're doing. A friend of mine asked me, what would it look like to be successful with this workshop? And for me, the opportunity and the hope is that you will use your cameras to help you tell better visual stories. And we can already start to see that happening over the last couple weeks. Most of the images that I believe I've gathered have been over the last couple of weeks, and I just am so impressed with everything that you all are doing to tell these stories. And I want to make sure that what we've talked about sticks. And I'm hoping this image is burned into your mind with these 3 statements, right? Have a strong subject, control your background, and fill the frame. And I already see that happening with the work that you're presenting. But if you guys get caught up in the stress of it all, just try to remember those simple things. We also took a little bit of a deep dive with our technical side of things, and I'm already seeing incredible results with that, talking about ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and how they all work together. Really hoping that this analogy of the pupil of the human eye is sticking with you when you get out there and you're thinking, okay, what do I do? Do I let more light in, or do I block it out? Always go back to, what is your eye doing? I'm going inside and it's opening up. I need to let more light in. If you guys can just kind of use that when you get in the bind, you'll be able to make those exposures beautiful in the manual mode. What I'm hoping everyone's thinking about now a little bit more, as you've seen what you can do with your photography, is thinking about what that image is before you go out on assignment. What is it going to be about? What is the mood? Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? Do I want a shallow depth of field? That you'll start thinking as you're driving to go do your interviews, if you still are doing those, or driving around, you're thinking, okay, what do I need to prepare? What is my visual reference? I always want to point this wonderful example out here by Jessica of this portrait. I think it's just so storytelling. And I saw an image from Denver Post that didn't even touch yours on the same story. I wanted to find it and use it as an example because yours is killer. And I want to recommend, as we go through everyone that these images that we're talking about, keep these for your personal portfolios. They really are wonderful, and they're going to tell a lot about our history. Hopefully you've gotten a lot out of the idea of ISO. We talked about this is the first thing that we're setting. And if we think about the color temperature and the shift in the day and the sun, we can kind of figure out how our ISO is responding to the light. We talked about some formulas that we have now that we know when we go into offices, businesses, indoor gyms, we know that we are automatically starting out at a 400 ISO or higher to get what we need. So that's just a baseline. And remember, we talked about also when you're done at the end of the day, if you're thoughtful and you're thinking about things, leave your camera set at ISO 400, aperture priority. If you're called out and you need to jump on something, your camera is going to make a reasonable exposure and you can adjust from that point. Christy did a fantastic job with Polis. This is something we're going to see often. And she responded well with the ISO and the visual variety, different angles, different perspectives. And this is something that you guys are going to be shooting a lot of, and be thinking about how we're interacting with the mask. How are we able to tell our stories through the mask, right? And this is a wonderful example by Nick. We can see personality coming through the image, through the eyes of both of these gals, and it's a wonderful environmental portrait, right? We talked a little bit about that. What does that mean? And what we can see with this background is that we know this is in a studio. It's not in a home office. So those little kinds of details, it's not little actually, really are going to help us understand the context of our images. Casey responded off the charts this week with this shoot and her capturing these moments with a high ISO and really wonderful framing with the band. What I love with the image on the right, or excuse me, left-hand side is this just kind of weird interaction of the gal. They're leaning in to hear each other. One has a mask, one doesn't. And something's going on. And I would like you guys to be thinking about that, or consider when you're going out covering that. What is the awkward, how can you capture the awkwardness of communication in other people when we're loosening our social distance, and what does that mean? Because I think for me, that's a very, very telling picture about socializing and being out. Right, so making sure you're shooting a lot, but there's so much, the lights going on, it's a great shot, excellent response. We also talked about how to beat our lovely Colorado sun. We've been lucky the last couple of weeks up here. It's been beautifully cloudy and cool, and I think this is a great example. Again, Jessica, wonderful. You just that guy brought down God, because the light is just perfect.
I think that was Ellie.
Oh,
this photo, I'm not sure, but it's amazing. I love that the second I saw it.
it's the hand
It was mine.
gestures.
It's your story, but just him, he looks like a priest.
Absolutely. Is he a priest? Superintendent. He looks like a priest. His hands are wonderful. Great. We lucked out with a cloudy, overcast day. Something on the podium is white and kicking back. African American faces can be very challenging in these kinds of situations. So excellent. And there's emotion in this. That's what I love about it. There's emotion in this. It makes you stop and think. Jessica, you had a great shoot you told us about. Tell us a little bit about this. After we had a brainstorming session, what was your approach when you went out there?
I definitely kept in mind that list of the different types of shots. I think it was like 7 or 8. So I was trying to really focus on that. And like in this photo on the bottom where you can kind of see like that line, almost like that disappearing line of the protesters. I was trying to keep in mind like filling the frame and sort of using that as well. And then it was really helpful. We talked a lot about posing for portraits. And so I tried to keep that in mind with this top photo. And I took a few other different poses and setups that we didn't print. But I'm hoping to actually profile that woman coming forward. So I have lots of other photos that we can use, or if we don't use this one. But yeah, I don't know if that helps, but those were some.
Yeah, excellent. No, that's great. I mean, I think that's it. When you're out on assignment, always making sure that you can try to double up if ever you need to with, your subjects. This pose is fantastic. I think you can use this a lot more, probably. It's wonderful. You filled the frame with these two. I mean, I think that's also what's great is you filled the frame. We could maybe crop in a little bit. The red is fantastic. Not really sure about the measuring stick. I didn't read the full story, but I love that. And I think this is a pose that you all can use. And one of the things that I would recommend is always when you are doing a pose like this with a foreground background, make sure you also do one with a person in the back in focus too. Right? Because this, and if we're talking about ethics and bias and those kinds of things, people can read into this kind of stuff. And so you want to be prepared with your response to those kinds of images. We also talked about a little bit awkward moments. I think the CCM is going to be famous in my book for kind of strange little moments. So that's fun, but I'm bringing out the point that the difference between a great picture is a fraction of a second, is the shutter speed, is just how people are interacting. So shooting more, shooting more, shooting more, shooting more. Really trying to get you guys to be thinking about that idea of rule of thirds, and that's coming through with your work, how our eye works through the frame in a Z pattern like we are readers, making sure to kind of focus on those top quadrants, or the quadrant, excuse me, to put our action.
15.
This image here, David, I just keep on looking at this image and looking at this image and looking at this image. I really, really appreciate a lot of things that are going on in here. And what it is a lot of still subtleties, excuse me. Also, you have really used a subtle rule of thirds here with the way that the framing is, maybe intentional, maybe not, maybe innate, your composition skills. What I love about it is her cigarettes in the back of her ear. She's holding her phone, and there's nothing posed about this picture. This is a real moment, and that's why I love it so much. Nothing's distracting me. I even get chills saying that. This is just a really, really wonderful moment, and it goes a lot to your ability to make people feel comfortable. And I think that all of you have that ability, especially with your wonderful small town, small locations. We talked about the formula, and hopefully you all wrote it down and are going to be remembering that. Write it on your notebook. Introduction, medium, close-up, portrait, interaction, sequence, clencher. David, I think you were missing last week. We wanted to highlight this great shot of yours. This is, again, another thing that we're going to be photographing a lot of, and how do we make this interesting? One point I wanted to make was when we are doing these overalls, we want to make sure there is a center of focus. So this group here seems to be the center of focus. We want to look for that interaction. Where is our eye going to take us? That's going to go beyond this detour sign. So well done there. Love all this visual variety here. Really sets the stage and the mood of the place. Masks are going to be something that we're going to be photographing a lot. So part of our new culture, and how do we do that? How do we make that impact? Lovely interaction. I think that was another thing that we want to pay attention to as we move forward. How are we going to be able to document interaction with people? This brings us to a new portrait that we have here, and I don't know, Elliot, if this is run, but Elliot sent this from the liquidation, Tiny Tots liquidation, Timbuktu. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the full name. And we brainstormed a little bit about this. Tell us about how that helped you with this shoot.
Yeah, kind of similar to what Jess was saying. I just really had those different types of images in mind going into it. Like for this one on the right, I was like trying to think of, okay, well, how would like a kid be looking at this display? Because I thought it was kind of a cute display. And so I tried to like kind of get low as you suggested, and then also kind of have that perspective. And then it was really obviously like very fluorescent light in there. So I kind of went and found this one corner that actually had some window light because I thought that it looked a lot nicer than just couldn't get the exposure right in the areas where I didn't have any natural light. Except for, this one down at the bottom. That one was kind of interesting because it was really bright, and I thought those little figurines were kind of cool. So yeah, I was just kind of trying to focus on the different things that you all had suggested. And yeah, like that portrait, tried to get low. She actually like at one point was waving that little bunny puppet, which was kind of funny.
Waving goodbye?
Yes, waving goodbye with the bunny puppet.
Oh, see, that's kind of like sad. That's a sad.
Yeah.
And then you have these.
Yeah.
These
And
nicer.
overall, yeah, those were just trying to do what you guys suggested. No, that's all.
And you did an excellent job, and it made all the difference in the world in terms of that slideshow online, because you sent me a few images, and then when I saw all these other images, I was very impressed. This for me is so telling, and so there's so many different wonderful levels to this. Highly recommend this. Stays in your portfolio of some nature. I thought this was the owner, and now after seeing the full take, I recognize that this is a customer, but it's still so strong in terms of the mood that you have all this bright fluorescent pink, half off, a mask, these happy little stuffed animals in this really, really sad moment. And I think you had a quote at the top of your story that said something like, absolutely, COVID killed the business, something to that effect. Wonderful idea of using that different perspective to represent a kid's view. Wonderful. Always remember, you can even go tighter with that stuff. The portrait is a little bit awkward, and it's hard because she has to put on a happy face and her business is closing, and she's probably awkward because she's someone that owns a toy store, and maybe she's a little bit awkward. But if we're here, she looks pained. And so, and the lower angle is tough, right? So think maybe with these, and we talked a little bit about this with David's idea, like photographing low, it is symbolic. What does that mean? Why are you doing it? And so you can do other things with her to do that same type of effect with your longer lens, your 80 to 200, I forget what it is. And get back and shoot her and compress her. So it's not as kind of awkward. It tells the story though. And your overalls are fantastic. I mean, they're so colorful. I would like to see if you could tone these better for the digital version and replace them because they're so colorful. David, we also talked about yours images from last week, and one thing I want to point out here is just really making sure you find some kind of interaction, whether that interaction is with a person or a thing. We need to find something that connects everything together, and we're going to be inundated with empty images. So I want to start a little bit with some editing process and what we do. And editing is really broken up into two different kinds of ways of thinking. One is the editing, right? Which is you're going out to the toy store and you shot 150 images, hopefully. And you need to look at those images to find out the best ones, the good composition, the moments, those kinds of things. That's editing it down to those 5 best images, those 10 best images. And quite honestly, I don't know what your digital limitations are, but I think the more the merrier in terms of digital presence. And if you can sequence those at all, try to sequence those in that idea of overall tight medium detail or something to that effect. So breaking up detail shots, if you can do that. I don't know if your platform allows that. But think about telling that digital slideshow as a story as well. So the first thing, is it in focus? There's no help in out of focus pictures. There is a little bit, but if it's out of focus, sorry, it's out. It should just be out. Eyes closed, that's an easy one, should be out. You know, portrait photographers spend months trying to, or hours I should say, replacing eyes, and it's totally not worth it. And this is where, and obviously you wouldn't be doing that as journalists, but this is where a fraction of a second comes into play, right? Someone reaching something and you catch them with their eyes closed, right? Just lay on that motor drive, give yourself more options. The whole thing about editing is giving yourself more options. So shoot more, shoot more, shoot more. Then you have more options and it's easier to use your post-production. Plus, if you get it right in the camera first, then you don't have to spend a lot of time on all of this. Now, post-production is when we're really getting into more of those ideas of color balance, cropping, sharpening, those kinds of things. And I want to get straight to the point with that in terms of ethics. So this is just, I had this slide out of order, I apologize. So editing is editing down a shoot. Post-production is treating those to become the best images for your production. And Anna's going to put in a link to Reuters guidelines of photos. But what I really want to point out here in this particular slide is that all of these tools are pretty universal over the platform. So over Lightroom, over Photoshop, even Pixlr, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher that name, has all of these tools. And so this list here is what Reuters allows their photographers to do. Paying particular attention to anything with dust marks or any kind of dirt within the camera, that is something that you can remove. That's the only thing that you're allowed to remove, nothing else. But you can make adjustments. So this is Elliot's image here that I toned from the original to what I feel is an acceptable way to look at it. I'd probably go a little bit darker. But what I want you to see in particular here are the corners of the images. So in the one on the left, this is untoned. We can see there's some details, but I brought that up a little bit to make sure that we had some detail. What we have to remember is that as a photographer, we need to, and the print, we need detail in the blacks and we need detail in the whites. That's where it gets messy, and that's when it starts to look awkward and not right in the print and the digital. I also lightened up the overall so that I could bring up her face a bit. And this is just so wonderfully lit. I brought up the contrast as well, and then I sharpened it, and I'm going to show you what I've done here. I sharpen almost all my images. One thing I'd like you guys to consider is asking whoever's on the desk how much sharpening you can do. This is another image from this series, and what I tend to do with any software is try out auto first. Let me just see what auto does. And usually it's too much, but it gives me a starting point in my mind of where I can begin. When we're shooting in the high ISOs, we're having a little bit more of that grain, right? And I don't know if you guys can see it with the quality of image here. And one of the ways that I kind of disguise it, pro tip here, is to bring up the contrast a bit, right? So it's not as grainy. And then I'm always adjusting my shadows and my highlights. And of course, then I did a little bit of color balance in this image. One of the first things I do after I decide that this is the image is I crop it. So then because more likely than not, I'm cropping out something that's annoying me and maybe white or maybe affect my exposure. So this one, and I think this is this Paul? I can't remember whose image this was originally, but
yeah,
Paul, I think that this image has a lot more impact if we're cropping it tight. And the only reason I'm feeling that it's okay is because I'm assuming that this sign on the on the left-hand picture, on the right-hand side, is in the same position, is saying, is pro ammunition. I'm assuming that. So by cropping this out, it's not changing the story. Now, if this had said the opposite of what it was saying, ban all guns, then I would feel that I need to keep that in, right? Because that's representing both sides. But because, and Paul, I don't know if you're here, I apologize, I'm not seeing my full audience here. I don't know if that was the case or not in this particular situation, but this is to me another great portfolio shot. It's beautiful, the pink thing, we love the pink. He's in shadow, the white's reflecting up in his face. This is how we're dealing with, you know, some of our bright sun issues. So I want to begin by showing you a little bit from Pixlr, and I know, David, you're very familiar with it. Is anybody else experimented with this? All right. So I think there's a lot of great programs out there worth investing in, but this is an easy one to use in terms of quick fixes, as I believe, Elliot, you said you're currently using, you know, basic cropping and that kind of thing. So I have, this is what you'll see, and you'll see Pixlr E is the version that we want to be using. You can open an image through your desktop and pull up that image, and actually I should do that because it gives you options in terms of size, and you always want to choose the biggest option that you have available to you. That one did not allow me to do that, so I apologize.
30.
Thank you. Stand by. This might be a little bit clunky, folks. So hang in there with me. So here you see it says pre-resize image. You always want to go with that highest version, the ultra, because I think the images are coming in a little bit low and a bit, they go out a little bit compressed. What I also want to make sure is that you all are shooting on the highest resolution that your cameras are shooting. Can everybody kind of give me a nod there? You don't have to be shooting on RAW with your situation, but JPEG large, do we know? Maybe we don't know. Maybe Anna, you can work on that and find that page in the manual. I have noticed that some of the images are being shot on a really relatively low resolution, which can affect a lot of different things here. So this image is coming on its side, and just give me a nod if everyone can see my screen. Thank you. You're gonna have to unlock these. They come in locked. So you're gonna unlock and then you can rotate from there. The first thing that I'm gonna do usually, oops, sorry, is to crop this image. And I think this is Elliot's, and it's another nice image. What's happened, and the reason why I'm cropping it, is because it has a little bit of distortion because it's a vertical shot with a wide angle. So we want to be careful with those. You wanted, recognize that you wanted to get a lot of information in, which is fine and what you should be doing, but shoot it horizontally, excuse me, right? Because then everything starts, if verticals, they just start going. So just be careful or choose a different lens. So I'm in the crop mode, and you could, oh, sorry, you hit C on your keyboard, that should bring you to crop. And then you have a lot of ads here that want to sell you things in the free version, as we know. I usually pull from the edges to keep my parameters, and I'm going to keep in his boots and the oxygen. I've taken out a little bit more of the truck just to prevent that bowing out. And then I hit return, and I've got my image the way it's cropped. From here, adjustments are going to be your best friend. And this is the same case. I know, Jessica, you use Photoshop, and it's the same in Photoshop. It's what's nice about this particular software. It does mimic a lot of what Photoshop and Lightroom already have. And most softwares will. I'm going to go to levels, and here on your levels, and you can move around your boxes so it's not right on top. You're going to see, Elliot, this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is the histogram. And it seems that maybe there was some discussion about using your histograms on your camera. Sometimes that can be a little bit annoying if they blink or they're just, you can't see the picture fast enough. But this is what it represents. It represents the darks and the lights. And a good way to kind of get more familiar with this is to take the extreme approach and do it all the way. Okay, go all the way to the end. Okay, I'm lightening it up. Go with pull from the black. Oh, that's what happens. And sometimes you kind of forget when you're doing things. What the kind of an MO you can do is bring down your blacks a little bit, right? So you're on your left-hand side, and you can see there's a little pencil mark with a black. And you're going to bring up your whites again a little bit. Now, this is where we have to be careful in your particular case there at CCM, is that our whites are getting too blown out. So just keep an eye on that and start paying attention in terms of the print product if you have details, right? So we have this guy who has a white suit on. When it goes to print, I don't know if it's gone to print, Elliot, or not. Check and see, are those wrinkles showing up? Is that texture of the suit there? Okay, so we're going to hit apply. And what I also tend to do a lot of is bump up my contrast. So under adjustment, you can also see brightness and contrast. And I usually do this after I've gotten my levels set because I don't want to over contrast. Again, this can destroy my whites and my blacks, right? But I also wanted to have a little bit of a punch. So I'll just, you know, kind of punch it up a little bit, eyeballing it, applying that. And this one doesn't need any color balance. However, we can go into color balance, and this gets a little bit more tricky just because it's a little bit about color concept. And what I will say from my experience with Canons is that they tend to shoot a little bit magenta, and you'll be able to tell that in your whites and your grays. So you can come in here and color balance. Maybe you notice that the faces are red, right? They have a little bit more red in their flesh tones than they should. You can come in here and do an overall change, right? And usually flesh tones are in your mids, and you would then see again, go to the side, okay, oh, that's adding green, oh, that's adding more. So I just need to kind of inch it up and apply that. What I recommend doing for the very last thing is to go into your under filters, and you'll see sharpen. And I would sharpen up the image a little bit. It should give me a option here. And when it gives you that option, you apply that. The other thing that you can occasionally play around with is the remove noise, right? And this is where we would use this on maybe the concert photos, some of the more grainy options that we have. Let's see if we can find one. Now this is not the original, so I'm already dealing with an edited version of this, which makes it difficult, right? So I'm guessing that this had a lot more detail in all the whites and probably was a little bit more saturated in the original version. And that's what I would like to see actually. So I'm going to go into my levels, and I'm going to bring down my blacks a little bit because I want that background to go black. And I'm going to also bring down my grays a little bit to give me, because it's already blown out, so there's not a lot I can do. I need to give it a little bit of texture, and I'm bringing down my midtones. Is everybody kind of with me a little bit? You nod? I'm applying that. And because it's already in this particular state of toning, all I can really do is I want to saturate it a little bit more to make those colors come up, and that will help in print as well. You have to be careful we don't get this guy in the middle going totally alien though, right? So we have to really keep an eye on what is the goal that we're trying to do, and what my goal is to try to bring up some of these rich stage lights. But then we can also go back again under filter, details, remove noise, and you guys will not probably be able to see it through these multiple screens. And it's going to give you an opportunity. I don't know if you could see that. It kind of flattened everything out. It's a fine, fine line when you start to sharpen and remove noise, because they're kind of connected. But if you have say a tight face with a lot of grain, and I don't have one at the moment, you can play around with this to remove that, the dots, the pixelization. And there was one portrait that it was Joseph's. Okay. So can everybody see my screen okay? I'm sorry, this is technology, this kind of stuff, the defined details. Right now what I'm in is Photoshop, and I just want to show you this because it's easier for me to explain the concepts from here. And Jessica, you should see this familiar menu, but this is, again, I've taken this from the internet, and this is not original. My guess is that Joseph shot this and it wasn't as underexposed. And what's happened here in this particular image, again, this has gone from print, my guess is it's gone from print to digital. So it's flattened out quite a bit. So I want to bring back a lot of that contrast. Also, she has a lot of grain in her face. So I've gone to levels, and I'm going to bring down the middle. So I'm going to darken up the middle a little bit. But I also want her face to be, me to see it be lighter. So I'm going to pull up on her. I'm looking at what the reaction is on her face. Being careful not to see these big hot spots out here. We want to be careful not to totally blow them out. If we do, we can always use our favorite tool, the crop tool. I love me some crop tool, right? So don't be afraid to use it, because you're going to find that you're doing everything that you can in the camera, but you still need to do a little bit of work in post-production, and that's where a whole nother set of classes could happen. What I'm also doing here, because she's an artist, is I'm going to make some adjustments in the saturation here. And as you can see, this is Photoshop. Hopefully you're seeing that it's very similar to the Pixar platform. The Pixar platform has its drawbacks, obviously, because it's free and in ads, but it's basically set up the same way. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. And I would say it's worth the investment to start looking around at something. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to saturate this up. I'm bringing it down a little bit, being careful about that. What I notice now that's happening, and I know this is a lot to take in, guys, hang on with me, is that I'm getting a lot of yellow now. So I'm going to go into my yellows, and I'm going to try to take a little bit of that out. And you can do this on multiple platforms. It's a fine line, as I said, because then you start going with red and blue. And this is, again, why you want to try to make sure that you are shooting, if you can, the color balance correctly. Now, Elliot said that her situation was difficult with her portrait, which it was. She had fluorescent light window light coming through pink things, through yellow things, through green things. So there was a lot going on in terms of what's possible, what the light was doing. But I think overall that was handled really well. Let me just go back here, bear with me all. So that, the basics of what what we are doing is adjusting those levels and curves, cropping to where it looks good. Don't be afraid to crop out nonsense, bright things, things that don't add to the story, but always ask yourself, am I changing the story by cropping this? Am I changing the story by lightening this too much? Color balance is your friend, and just remember the opposite of red is green. So with the Canon, you're going to always have a little magenta, and then get in there and fine tune those highlights and those shadows. And you can do, and sharpen is your last thing, but double check with your press guys. But really, it sounds complicated, but it's not as complicated as you would think. If you're just focusing on those things. In Pixlr, you'll see there's a dodge and burn tool here. And I don't know, David, if you've ever played with it. It's a little bit more cumbersome. I don't know how you find it, but that's where we can go in and lighten and darken specific areas, which is totally legit in photojournalism. David, if you could just give us come on and tell us just any pro tips you might have in regards to using this. While he's setting himself up, I really didn't talk about the final export that you're going to come in here and save and use your file naming, which whatever that may be, and always export to that highest quality you possibly can. And I don't know, David, if you have any more tips on that particular aspect of what you've seen being particularly, you're on mute still, successful with production, and things that maybe you could be a little bit more aware of when you're posting both in print and online. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Sure. Can you guys hear me? Okay, gotcha. So yeah, I would say, like I said, I mean, going back and forth between web and print. I mean, I just, seriously, my best answer at this point is just for us reporters to physically, manually go back in and swap out, what we submitted versus what went into, the print editions. Unless we end up changing. Russell, hey, quiet. Unless we end up, sort of changing our workflow to any degree, I don't really see any other, way around that. I did want to say, as far as the dodge and burn tool, like you were mentioning, seriously, that has become like my best friend when it comes to preparing stuff lately. And it's worth, Russell, it's worth getting used to, like, the brush sizes and the brush strength, and then the differences between, like you've got there, shadows, midtones, and highlights. Because seriously, I mean, it's like it makes all the difference. I don't know if you saw my Memorial Day photos. They came out pretty well, and that was all thanks to that burn and lighten tool. Was because otherwise, I mean, it was high noon on a really sunny day, outdoors, and so I just had these terribly harsh shadows on everyone's faces, and so you had kind of these silhouettes otherwise. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, God, I mean, more than the sort of blanket, tools, as far as like exposure is really useful. Russell, exposure is really useful, but seriously, I mean, it's that lighten and darken tools that are really what I find myself using the most.
That's a great point, and thank you, and thanks. Your son wants to be part of the party. That's all, you know. He knows where that's at.
Yeah.
And that's a great point on any platform. So over here, I just want to point out what all that David just mentioned. So dodge and burn, means that you can either lighten or darken an area, and it is a fabulous tool. What is great about Pixlr is it tells you what do you want to do. So you have here on the upper right-hand side, left-hand side, the mode. Do you want to lighten, which means dodge in photography vocab, or do you want to darken, which is burn it, right? Make it darker, get that clouds in there, right? Then here are, what is it that you want to do? The shadows, the midtones, the highlights. So highlights, often you're darkening. In shadows, you're usually lightening. So it's pretty straightforward in regards to that. What you have to play around with, and I think what David was alluding to, is what's called the brush size. And so you kind of have to play around with what's going to work. I recommend these fuzzier versions, which are called feathered. And it's a softness because you don't want it to be an exact circle. So playing around more in these sizes, and you try to get your image as big as you can. What I'm doing here is I'm just enlarging. I'm using the Command and the plus key on a Mac, but I think you can also do it here on the right-hand side. You'll see 80% plus and minus. I hope everyone can see that. So get it up as big as you can, because that's going to make it more accurate. And then you can choose the brush from there. Remembering that the theory is you can always take out, but you can't put in. I mean, that's kind of how you want to approach it, even though that's a little bit false in the digital world. You want to build on it. You don't want to just, blast a sucker. Let me see if I can try to
50.
show you what I mean. Thank you. So it's on light and it's on shadows. You can see that I'm really taking out a lot in her face. And we often call this, when it's too much, the hand of God, right? Because it looks like a little angel or she's a halo. And that's, if you look back at the old school images, dodge and burn days, you can see it really pretty easily. So that's where you want to be careful, but you can adjust your strength, right? You can play around. You can still undo everything. You can do a little bit of burning, meaning getting rid, like say this is a little bit, it looks like paper towels to me. I don't know if you all can see it. Looks like a paper towel stack here. It's a little bit annoying to me. I could, in ethical terms, just burn it down a little bit, because I'm not really changing anything. You don't want to get into the habit of it. You want to do it right in the camera first. And I agree. I think that's probably the tool that could benefit the most. This is also this Band-Aid option is heal. So what I've noticed is sometimes we get a little dust in our cameras because we forgot to clean it, or we went out on a windy day or whatever that may be. And what it shows up as is big chunks of gray. Now I don't see any in this particular image, but I want to show you how it works with there's some nails back here, it looks like. I hope you can all see. Sorry. So all I'm going to do is take this Band-Aid and I can reduce the size. I have size up here, and I can do it to the specific size, which is good to try to do, and just click it and it goes away. And then here's another one, click, gone, right? And this is why it's so dangerous, because we can do so many things that aren't very nice. So to do that, because dust is not funny. Here again, I'll show you here. Oh, that was my screen. Well, I know that was a lot with the editing, and I'd love to give you more and more specifics. I'd love for everyone to ask some questions now, if you have any, about the editing process. I know, Jessica, that was one of the things that you really wanted to chat about, and there's just so much, it's a lot to get through, but I think if you all can remember the basics of, first, is my image in focus? Can I crop it to make it better? Can I crop out distractions? And can I make it so that the exposure looks great in print or digital? And sharpen it up a little bit. Just those few little steps, I think, will make a big difference and impact on your images. So let me give you guys some time to jump in if you have any questions about anything, what we've been over.
I have one. When we're cropping, can we use any dimensions that we want? Should we try to stick to like 8x10, 4x6, that type of thing? What's the rule of thumb there?
That's a great question. So one of the things is, obviously you should know what your measurements for your front page are. I believe they're mostly horizontal. And so get that if you don't already know that. And if you know it's a cover shot, constraint to that. If you're doing a picture package, I think you have more opportunity to create different types of images, different sizes. Square is so accepted now because of Instagram. I think that that's being seen more as an opportunity to diversify images, but I would say within a layout, not on its own. I think it depends on what your layouts are. So how much text, how much ads, how many ads, is it appropriate? To be quite honest, for me personally, and this is more of an opinion, is I like to retain the 35 millimeter. Right? We're not shooting film anymore, but that's what the size of the camera film is, and that's what the digital world shoots in for the most part, is that 35 millimeter. I try to make them fit that scope. So in terms of height and width, that it's not really about that, because it depends on the platform, but the shape to me is more important. So we don't want to make necessarily super skinny images like this. We don't want to crop this down to this guy necessarily. Plus it degrades the image. So that's the other thing. How much are you cropping in to get what you want? Did you shoot it enough so it's not breaking up? Does that make sense? I'm pretty sure Jessica, you know what I'm talking about. I would check with the designers and check with the holes. That I assume that there's some pagination being made that has set sizes for your images. So you could always double check that, because that would help them if you have the images cropped, maybe your A3 or your cover images set.
I think 3x2 is generally a pretty standard ratio.
Things to consider again when cropping is that quality.
On our covers, we tend to feature a horizontal photo. We have more flexibility with that now that we've moved to a multi-story start format on our page ones, and likewise on the website, a horizontal tends to work better as the lead display photo, particularly on mobile, so that we don't get a story that's pushed way down because the art's a vertical, or we don't get gray bars on either side of the photo. But beyond that, we can accommodate in print and online just about anything. Glenn, would you concur with that?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I was just going to ask if that's a similar rule of thumb for the monthlies, because they've got the magazine style type cover. Glenn, do you know?
Sorry, can't find my mute button. Yeah, the ratio is slightly different, but it's pretty similar. I believe Aaron told us not to fret too much because paginators could handle just about everything the same for you.
If I could just jump in for a second, I was going to say one thing I think to keep in mind, both Twitter and Facebook have a weird aspect ratio for what they automatically crop photos to. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but it's a little squished. It's a little shorter than you would think. It's not exactly like 3x4. So I kind of try and when I can, you know, crop or select primary photos with that in mind. And, you know, I think a great rule of thumb for us would be to avoid using primary photos that are portrait oriented, just because of that, just because then, you know, especially if it's a portrait of a person, which sometimes it is, if it's about a political figure or something, if all we have is a mugshot, I go in and I actually just put like big fat black bars on either side just to stretch it out so it's a good ratio, so I'm not just getting like some close up on somebody's Adam's apple and that's like what, you know, goes up on Facebook. Just a thought.
Where do you do that, David? The black bars?
I am so like rudimentary with this. I am just doing it in MS Paint more often than not. And I am just eyeballing it because I'm usually just going fast and doing it as quick as possible. So, you know, but I mean, you can do it different ways, but I mean, MS Paint's one.
It used to be easy to do a Google image search for a picture, and then that would put a big fat, just like what we're seeing here now in the Photoshop. You know, it put a big black barrier around the outsides of it, and you could just, you know, screenshot it off of that if you're talking about for social. But Google has monkeyed around with their image, and it's not as easy to do anymore. But it's handy to sometimes have, you know, particularly on a small, like if you're copying a, you know, sort of a low res picture for, you know, from a site. Sometimes it's handy to have the black around it because the picture itself, you don't want it to blow up too big. It's not high res enough.
And I don't know if you all are familiar with Canva, but I love Canva. It's free, and you can really do a lot with it, with all of what you have available to you, and it will create, say you have a Facebook post, you can use a template. If you just want, it has all these fancy ones. You could use your own blank one, right? Because it's set, all the parameters are set. And then you can upload all your images that you are using. You can see I've been stalking you guys for a while. So I can put that into my post. And then all I need to do here is change my background. I'm going to use black. And then this is ready to go and export as a JPEG. And honestly, I think this is one of the best investments. Canva, it's free. You can do so much. You can upload the logo for the paper there if you wanted to have that on here. You can add text, you can do different backgrounds, and it's very intuitive, very easy to use. You can upload anything to it. I use it for everything. And then export and ready to upload, change the name. And then you don't really have to think about too many things. Your Instagram stories are here, templates are available for you. So definitely worth, I even edit sometimes in my photos in here when I'm in a really big rush. But you can see, you can pick all kinds of templates. As journalists, I would obviously recommend that you just stick to the basic simple ones, but lots of opportunities for you there. Other questions?
So I have a question that's kind of not related, but I was wondering, can you explain a little bit what DPI is, how to check it, and because I get a lot of courtesy photos, for the monthlies. And so, as we all do, I think we all get a lot of courtesy photos. And Glenn, oh, you need 300 DPI. And I have no idea what that means and how to explain it to another person who has no idea what it means.
That's a great question. That's a great question. So DPI is dots per inch. Dots per inch. It's also, sometimes you'll also see it called PPI, which is pixels per inch. And different, depending on the designer or person, they may refer to either one of those. The standard size for online, for anything online, is 72 DPI. And that's what most people will send you. Personally, I think it should be 150, because I think you do see a degradation at 72. 300 is your max. 300 is like, it's going to look really good no matter what you do to it. And if you're asking someone for a photo, say, hey, I would really like one of your courtesy photos, please just ask them, please send it at the highest resolution you can, is the best, because you don't know what it's coming in at, number one. So if they already have a kind of a crappy photo, and then they oh, I need to do something else, they're already going to degrade it. So just try to get it to them from the raw, right? As much as they can. You can fiddle around with it, but what it means is if an image is 4:6 at 72 DPI, and you want to blow it up to 8:10, it's going to get all grainy and it's not going to be sharp. And because there's not enough information, it's not enough dots per inch. There's not, and everything digital is pixels and dots, right? Zeros and ones. Still can't get my head around the 0 and 1 part, but that's the problem. So if they send you, oh, this is 72 DPI, and then you go to put it in the paper and you want to run it big, it's just going to break up. So always ask your people, hey, I need it as large as you can. It's okay, we can tone it or whatever. You know, just give it to me as large as you can. Does that help?
Yes. But also, is there a way to check it? I know you can check it in Photoshop. You know, because a couple of times, you know, people will say, oh, well, will this one work? I have more if you need. And
okay.
I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess so. I don't know.
Okay, so did you say you had Photoshop? I'm sorry.
I don't have Photoshop. I do on the Mac at work, but obviously, you know, there's sometimes like coronavirus times that I can't use that computer. So
I don't know about Pixlr. We'll go there next, but if you can have anything Photoshop related, usually it'll be under file info. Okay, and then you open that up, and then it's going to give you all the data. So this is called the metadata.
Oh, okay.
And you can see right down here, I don't know if I can make it bigger. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, because the images I'm pulling from the internet are 72 DPI. So I'm wondering, I'm guessing they're already up, they're being crunched. So right here, resolution 72 DPI at 3,456 pixels, which I always have to figure out what that means in inches, because I don't know, but that's where you find it. File info. And in Photoshop, you know, this is where you can see all the information, when it was shot, what kind of camera, what the settings were, those kinds of things. And this is also where you could put, if you had Photoshop, all your information, your cut lines, all that kind of thing.
Right.
In Pixlr, let's just see real quick if there is anything.
Yeah, because I do have a freelancer who's just photos. I haven't had freelancers in a while, but pre-COVID, and he embedded everything. And so,
yeah,
like,
that's great.
And depending on what kind of laptop you have too, on Macs, you can, if you click on the image on your desktop, if you Command I, it'll show you the metadata with the megabytes and even all the settings, your, you know, shutter speed, things like that. So.
I think the PCs must have that as well. I'm not seeing here anything to check that in this particular, but I'll snoop around and see if I can find something. The PC should have a similar, you're looking for file information. So usually it's under information. If you have a preview of some nature on the PCs, that should come right up for you.
Okay. I'm gonna try. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have a question, or two little things. First, I just want to clarify, I just went and looked at my settings and it looked like I actually was not shooting in RAW. And so I went and switched it to RAW because it sounds like that's just what we should be doing. That's a yes. I'm seeing head nods.
Well, just be prepared that it takes up more room on your computer. And
okay.
so if you switch it over to RAW and from JPEG, you'll notice maybe you had 2,000 shots available. And now that you've gone to RAW, you'll probably only have, let's say, 75, right? Because
is there somewhere that I can see how many photos I have available?
Yeah.
Because I never know.
Right on the top in the, Anna, is that correct? Right lower corner, which has a number.
Oh, that says 628.
Okay, so that means you have 628 images left. So as you shoot,
Gotcha.
that number should go down.
Right, okay. And then my other question is just, should every photo have some level of editing or post-production applied?
Yes, in my opinion. I think that it's rare that it comes out of the camera perfect unless you're working in a studio and you've done all that. Most likely, shadows and highlights are going to be needed to be adjusted. Okay. I also really feel that sharpening is a big thing. And what I would encourage you all to do is really start looking at your images in the paper and the print and the digital and try to remember, okay, what did I do to make this better? Did I actually adjust the shadows? Oh, that made it look better in print. Because it's up to you then to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to make it, or talk to your press guys. But let me get back quickly to RAW because I don't want to leave this hanging. RAW takes up more space and it's also slower processing time. Okay, so say if you are shooting basketball and you're shooting in RAW and you're shooting motor drive, right? It's going to take it more time to write, we call it write, to the card. And so it'll be like a little bit slower. Okay, so that's one thing. It takes up more space on a hard drive or a card. So be aware of that. What the benefits are and why we would like to see you do this is that you have more flexibility if you make mistakes, right? So say you went in and you had been inside and you ran out to go photograph a car accident and you had been on 1600 and now all of a sudden you're in bright sun and your image is just like gone. Now in RAW, we can, remember I was saying with whites and darks, there's not information, but in RAW, there's more information, right? So there's more opportunity to save those images. You guys aren't shooting a ton, so it's not that big of a deal. I'd recommend it, but it also is slower on the processing of your computer, right? So, and I have not checked out enough, and we can do this too as a follow-up, whether Pixlr, and maybe David, you know, whether Pixlr can handle raw images. I'm not sure or not on that. But in terms of
sorry. Yeah, it allows you to go pretty large. It prompts you to bump down file sizes. And I think that's just because it's easier to work with. But you can go fairly large. I'm not sure quite how large it allows you to do, but you can.
I think there should be, and Anna, do me a favor and check on this while you can, is I think there's an option to shoot raw JPEG, which means it will give you both of those files. And for someone like you who's everyone who's building their portfolio, you want to have those options. Remember talking, and I want to encourage everyone in regards to your portfolios and your contest entries, which are coming in February, make sure you have those original files untouched somewhere, because you don't want to rely on what your last edit was to submit to that, right? Because it's probably not correct. So make sure you're saving all those. And if you know it's going to be a fantastic shoot, it's something that's going to be amazing shooting in RAW, it just protects you more. You know, you can be more just going to the school again to shoot a building mug. That doesn't need to be on RAW. We don't need to save that for really anything. But if we're doing a one of a, you know, you just want to say it where to go now, say AP picked it up, or what other media organizations you guys work with, you want to be able to give them the highest quality. They'll probably tone it anyways, right? So everyone should be on at least JPEG high in your camera. So just make sure that's the case.
Yeah, so update with the RAW and the JPEG. You can shoot in both RAW and large file format JPEG. It'll probably be a bit slower, so sports might be not the time to use that, but it would give you that option. So, I mean, the way that I think about it is if I'm in a tricky lighting situation, I'll use RAW because I know I'm definitely going to need that editing to back me up. If I'm in a more controlled lighting situation, I might be more on the JPEG end of things, using a large file format for JPEG. So
that's a great point. Like the concert Cassie shot, you know, that would be something you would want to shoot in RAW. Just gives you more options.
Right.
Great point.
Yeah. And actually, this document, I don't know if we can share now or in a follow-up email, but I have kind of a list of the settings, and there's a graph that shows what the different icons mean for RAW and for JPEG.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And then I had one other quick question. If we were, I just wanted to ask if you guys have a recommended setting for focus, just what you like to use the best, because sometimes I feel like my photos are not as focused as they could be.
Yes, and that is, I'm so glad you brought that up. There's a couple different things, and I'll try to multitask and talk to you about this as well. So there's two things. If you wear glasses or contacts, one of the things that may be an issue is your eye through what's called the diopter, the part that you're looking through. On the side, this is a super secret tip. On the side, you should have a little dial on the side, right? Everyone should have that. And that should be adjusted to your eye. So I wear contacts, I wear glasses. When people pick up my camera, yeah, thanks, Anna. They say, oh, I can't see anything because I wear contacts, so it's set to my eyes. So one of the first step is set that. And that's something that falls in and out of focus, so you want to readjust it. So one of the things to do is take your lens off and focus at a white wall and adjust that till you see those lines in the center focus. Now that wasn't exactly what your question was, but it will help with this process. What I personally like to do is use what's the center weighted, the dot in the middle, because what I do is I refocus. So I take my picture and I put what's called the auto block on. So on the top, you should see AF-L somewhere around on the right-hand side. Anna, do you see that? And so what I do is I focus and then I recompose because I don't want everything to be in the center. So what the AF does is it locks it and you can recompose however you want to. So probably what's happening for you is that you have some similar setup where it's focusing on the thing in the middle and then you're recomposing. So it's going out of focus. So that's one of the things that's the most common error.
And if you want, I can share my screen and show the manual where it has that center weighted focus.
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So these are kind of the three different modes. There's one shot, AI servo, and AI focus. And then we have different regions where you can focus. So it can be a single point, a region, or a vertical area, or you can make it smart and it can kind of choose what to focus on. But with what she's talking about with the center weighted focus, you set it to AI servo so that it focuses changing with like the distance and movement, and then single point. So basically you put your subject in the center of your frame, focus on that, and then when you move your camera it should stay in focus, if that makes sense.
So you're keeping it locked, and it is. So let me just share one thing here with you. That was good. So there's a lot of reasons for focus. It's one of it's so frustrating, if you ask me, when you have bad focus. So a lot of what I've seen in some of the images that I've in the paper is, and what I see a lot with my own work, is back focus. So I think I'm on the subject, but it's actually the thing in the back that's getting focused. So that's where it has trouble. And there's a lot of reasons that can happen. And if you have the continuous focus on, say you're in the sports mode and you're shooting something that's stagnant, sitting, portrait, then it gets confused sometimes if you're not really paying attention and you're locking it in. Anything glass, anything reflective, it will freak out. I'm sure you've heard that. So the best thing with a glass or reflective surface is focus that manually. Anything with glass, you can always go straight up to it because it's not going to show. You're so close, your plane of focus is so close that it won't see the glass. So when you're shooting through something, always just go straight up, put your lens right on that. Also when there's trouble with focus is if there's a lack of contrast. So I was trying to shoot a gray fish in a gray pond and it couldn't track it. It couldn't find it. There was nothing for it to grab onto. I like to have a few centers of points of focus so that, especially with faces, so it's not a very shallow depth of field. And remember, this goes back to also depth of field. So there's focus is a challenge because we have depth of field, we have motion, we have reflective surfaces. Remembering our shutter speed can also affect that. And just be thinking about what is it that I need to be focusing on. That it's hard, it's super hard when someone's coming towards you to focus, right? Because they're moving and your camera's like, what do I focus on? So position of where you also are also makes a big difference. And we'll send you some videos because the focus can be a tricky thing depending on what you're shooting. And that's why my go-to is always the center weighted option, because I know that I can control it. I know I can lock it and refocus the way I want to. Great question. Did that answer a little bit?
Yes, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to it, like you said, but that helps me kind of get to a good starting point and improving those photos.
I recommend keeping it on a single. You have different speeds of focus too. So you have continuous high, continuous low, I think something like that. Keep it on single for when you're just doing those portraits. And then you can get a faster focus if you need it.
That would be the one shot option. Yeah, one shot.
One shot option, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so generally speaking, there's like the tracking option where if something's moving, the focus follows that subject. And then there's the option where you just choose an area of the frame. So whatever falls in that region will be in focus. So I guess that's kind of like an overview.
Let me just interject here. We're now coming up on an hour and a half. So if some of you need to peel away, please do. Jessica, we'll do our story conference as soon as we're done here, and Ellis, I'm with you at 1. So.
Great. Well, it's been such a pleasure. did want to offer, if you guys can bear us for another week, we have put together a presentation on bias. If you were interested in joining us for that and helping maybe facilitate a little bit more conversation amongst everyone here about it, I think the important part is we need to discuss and question and hear each other in regards to that. We have less than 100 days, all right? And so really paying attention to how that affects us emotionally as reporters and personally. I mean, it's hard to say we all have emotions, but how can we keep those in check? And if you were interested in that, we just keep this one time slot and just roll it over to next week and share with you some of our thoughts and ideas and open up some facilitation for discussion. If you're interested in Mark, you can get back to me on that if that's something that you think reporters would enjoy. It really has been a pleasure and learned so much from you and what you're doing, and so proud to be able to share this with you, because you really are making some great stories that are worth everything. Please continue to fight the fight with your journalism and make great pictures and tell true stories. We're around and you have our email. I'd love to get a couple video testimonials from you if you wouldn't mind. Just tell me what you thought and get some feedback. And we're always here to critique and think of us when it comes to contest season so we can help you if you need to make those choices, because there's lots of award-winning photos here. I've seen an amazing change in just 2 weeks. So thank you for your patience and your attention.
Thank you, Jill and Anna, and we appreciate your generosity with your time and your advice, and both in these sessions and offline. And if you send me the information on that session next week, I'll be glad to distribute it.
Great.
I can tell that there's been a great deal of interest, and as you say, a lot of what you all have had to say has sunk in, and can only help us get better as time goes on. And hopefully as we develop some of the better tools to coordinate what we do for online and print, make it a smoother process as far as getting good pictures on both of those platforms.
Great. Well, we're here to help. We want to see you succeed. You need to succeed. You need to win. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well,
Jill, I wanted to add, thank you so much. First of all, this has been so helpful. And also, I'm going to miss your pep talks so badly. Almost every time you've said something about keep up the good fight or like you guys are doing important work, I was like, hot damn, I needed to hear that. So thank you so much.
and please, I know you don't hear it. I know you guys don't hear it. And it's only the angry people out there that are the ones that actually get in touch about the trivial stories that don't mean anything. And I know it's hard to be beaten down by everything that surround you to make you question what you're doing and your career choice and all of those things, but you are what we need right now. You are what makes democracy happen. So I don't take it lightly, and I know you guys don't either. So thank you.
Yes.
Hopefully, you'll see you next week.
Yes.
Outside of everybody, we are doing the layouts today for the monthlies. So I'll send you guys some PDFs of the neighborhood story that I was working on. It's an ASF, and remember, we're going to go out and get all the neighborhood photos. So that's being built today, as well as the covers with the juggling guy and the dancers. So I will send those PDFs as they appear on the page once Ben's done with them.
Yay, thank you. Love to see that. Love to see that. You guys are killing it. Can't wait to see what keeps happening.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. Have a great day. Stay healthy, everybody. Anna, I'll catch up with you.
Okay.